And the question it raises as well is who is around him these days? You know, if someone like Zhang Youxiao, who is the commander that he purged a few months ago, if someone like that could be purged, a childhood friend whose parents were friends.
Okay.
Yeah. So who if they've known each other since primary school, actually. So who would be around Xi now to give him kind of unvarnished, good advice? Analysis. The worry that you come out of this is that you've got an aging leader who is increasingly isolated, and everybody's terrified of him because he's so ruthless with his purges. What kind of decisions does that kind of leader make if nobody can kind of get rid of him in the short term, which seems to be the case?
Let's go abroad now, because obviously when we have Cindy on the show, it's always a great chance to talk about what is going on in China, a country that I visit and I'm fascinated by. But let's start with President Xi. It's reported that the Chinese president has sacked more than half his top military commanders, suggesting he wants no opponents to his possible plan to rule for life. This is not the first time that Xi has purged military commanders. It's been going on for a while now. What is going on behind the scenes, Cindy?
Nobody knows. It's like that bit in QI where they go, the klaxon comes on and says nobody knows, because it could be either way, right? You could have a leader who is so paranoid that actually he is purging good commanders and generals who are loyal, but he's been in power for almost 15 years now. He's so paranoid that he is just purging these people anyway. Or it could be that the PLA is so corrupt, that procurement is so corrupt, and the Russian invasion maybe brought that to light, or that they're so incompetent that they could never invade Taiwan, that Xi is trying to kind of clear out the decks. Either way, I don't think it says good things about the strength of the Chinese military, and I think it has real implications for what happens with Taiwan, because I would, again, either he brings in such inexperienced people to replace the purged that they are yes men and say, yes, of course, General Secretary, we can go to Taiwan, we can win, and then he does that, or it's a sign that the PLA is nowhere near ready to do something like that. So I think it's just all fascinating, and the unsatisfactory answer is that the party keeps such a tight lid on what goes on inside that nobody really knows, and anybody who tells you they know exactly what's going on, what gossip there is, are likely not really well sourced.
I think that's right, isn't it? That what it says to me is that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, is in no position to fight a war. We spend our time in Britain and obviously in the US talking about the threat from China, but maybe it's overblown, Michael.
It could be, yes, but nobody really knows much about the military in China anyway. These various figures who've been named and apparently purged, I mean, I'd never heard of any of them, to be frank. They are people who clearly are quite senior in the armed forces, but you don't know what responsibilities they held. The interesting thing is, it appears that many of the ones who've been sacked were newly appointed, which suggests either that he made a mistake and appointed people he decided he didn't really like, or they turned out to be pretty dud when they got into office. I mean, you would more likely expect him to purge the old-timers who might have assumed a sense of power for themselves and had ideas of their own, and he thought they were getting too ambitious. That would sort of seem more logical. But to sack all the people you just appointed seems very odd.
And the question it raises as well is who is around him these days? If someone like Zhang Youxiao, who is the commander that he purged a few months ago, if someone like that could be purged, a childhood friend whose parents were friends.
Okay.
Yeah. So who if they've known each other since primary school, actually. So who would be around Xi now to give him kind of unvarnished, good advice? Analysis. The worry that you come out of this is that you've got an aging leader who is increasingly isolated, and everybody's terrified of him because he's so ruthless with his purges. What kind of decisions does that kind of leader make if nobody can kind of get rid of him in the short term, which seems to be the case?
And it's not just trouble with the military. Xi, the Chinese economy has been stuttering for a while, and in your column you focus on the issue of AI, because obviously China has grown much, much richer over the last 40 years. It's had its real estate crash. It's got youth unemployment. And now your thesis is that it will face the same existential crisis, if you like, that the West could face with the arrival of AI and people basically being thrown out of their jobs. What's your view on what's happening with AI in China?
Yeah, definitely. And in some ways it's more acute in China because the government has made diffusion and deployment of AI much more of a government strategy. So whereas in the West we might say, let these companies do what they're doing, what people use day to day is not the government's question. But in China, they are explicitly driving forward companies and organizations and individual users to basically embed AI as much as possible in their lives. So we can expect, I think, AI to have a much more impact on Chinese lives than maybe even, your average Brit in the short term, because that's a specific government direction. So what does that mean then for the graduates starting out in office jobs, and for the kind of migrant workers who are, I was shocked to read this when I was doing my research, that more than half of them left school before the age of 16. I thought that under China's economic growth that actually those migrant workers are, better educated these days, better, they are well fed, but, at least a bit richer and a bit more privileged. Clearly not, if over half of them are leaving school before the age of 16 still. So what happens to those kind of marginalized groups, basically? And China's going to have an almighty political question on its hands because it cares about social stability so much. So do you go full guns blazing with AI and risk social stability, or do you slow down AI and risk America overtaking? Because there's that kind of existential question there as well. So it's very, very difficult. And I'm not sure they're thinking about it enough. Although I'm not sure anyone's thinking about it enough anyway in the world.
No one knows what to do about anything, Michael.
That's true, and certainly not me. And certainly not AI, which is opening up. I mean, I watched a very good explanation on television about 3 days ago about what AI is all about. And I thought just for a minute, I think I grasped it. And 5 minutes after the program ended, I said, I really haven't a clue what it's about. I mean, I know in principle, but the implications and where this will go and how it will affect our society and our economy and all that are really mysterious. I mean, we just don't know.